Hey, what is up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi back with another Market Watch episode here. So the big thing happening this week is the release of Ghosts from the Past, a set that was really hyped up early on, but has now kind of flopped. We're going to talk a little bit more about this set and go over a couple of the different key cards, but honestly I feel like there's not too much to say. There isn't a ton of valuable singles in the set. We are going to do a sort of penny stock breakdown for the Ghost from the Past set sometime next week though, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Aside from that, we do have a few other cards that I am keeping an eye on that I want to have a bit more of a general discussion about. Cards I think that you guys should be keeping an eye on moving forward now that we have this one big reprint set out of the way. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to take a look at right off the bat are the Ghost Rares from Ghost from the Past, which are obviously the most hyped up and valuable cards in the set. We were seeing some really crazy prices early on. I think that people were trying to sell all of the Ghost Rares for anywhere from $500 to $700, but obviously we've seen them sort of fall off since then. Right now we have Dark Magician at the top of the set, which was to be expected, at $575. Then we have the BLS Link and Blue Eyes Alternative at around $450. Firewall Dragon at $380, and then Crystal Wing at the bottom down at around $320. Obviously these prices are still really raw because the set has been only out for a day or so officially, and people are still waiting to hit up their locals or get their product delivered in the mail before they can actually get to product. I think that without a doubt these prices are going to fall over the next couple of weeks. There is going to be a ton of people tearing the product open to chase after these really hyped up cards, and with everyone looking to undercut one another in order to make sales, we should see the prices fall significantly. The prices have already dropped over the last couple of days. I think that BLS and Alternative were up at $500, and then Firewall and Crystal Wing were at $450, something like that. And even though I can't say where exactly they're going to drop to, especially given how volatile prices have been around the collector's market recently, it's not so much a question of whether or not they're going to drop, but rather how low will they actually go. I definitely think that over time, there's a lot of potential for these cards to go up in price, but even then I think that it would be a mistake to buy in too early before the prices have had a chance to cool off. People are saying a lot of different things about clumping of Ghost Rares and whatnot, and I can't say for sure exactly what the ratios are going to be, but I think that in general, we should be expecting to pull 10 Ghost Rares out of every 12 cases, so a little under 1 Ghost Rare per case. That's not to say that you can't pull multiples, but I don't think you want to gamble on the fact that you're going to get that ridiculously lucky when you're opening this product. Playing a lottery system with cards like this can be really fun because you can hit it really big, but the Ghost Rares are hard enough to pull that you don't really want to count on it. If you're like me and you're wanting to buy single cards just to invest in them, definitely wait for the prices to cool off over the next couple of weeks before going in. Alright, so for a reprint set, Ghost from the Past was actually really underwhelming. Usually we expect to see some more valuable cards reprinted and made more accessible to the player base, but for whatever reason, most of the reprints that we got were actually rarity bumps. This feels kind of bad because with rarity bumps, we already had access to most of the cards. They were only $1 or $2, it's just that we now get holo versions. They're nice to have, but they don't make up for the dollar amount that you spent on your sealed product, right? The only reprint that we have in the set that you can actually get a significant amount of value back from is Evenly Matched, which was already reprinted as an ultra rare in Dual Power a couple of years ago, making this even more confusing. It's kind of silly that the best reprint that we have is a $20 ultra that had already had multiple printings available. Right now, this reprint of Evenly is at $15, which does make sense because the Dual Power version was about $20 before the reprint. Now, under normal circumstances, I would expect this version of Evenly to fall to around the $10 mark, just because there are several versions of it out now. The thing to watch out for is that there's so few other cards in Ghost from the Past that are worth money that people just might not be willing to move theirs for any lower because they have to make some value back somewhere. It's a good reprint in terms of accessibility because it was still kind of annoying to try to find a set of this card before, but this speaks more to how weak the rest of the reprint choices in the set really were. Expect this card to settle as low as $10, but as high as $15 over the next couple of weeks as one of the few value reprints that you can actually pull. So the other single card that I think is worth talking about from this set is Dragunity Mus, which at this point outside of the Ghost Rares is kind of like the only chase card out of the set. This is a really awesome card for Dragon Link because this card combined with literally any other card to use as discard fodder for Dragon Ravine is like an entire combo, which is really cool. It's also good in Dragunities, of course. They can do some really cool combos now as well. This card is really hyped up because Dragon Link is already arguably the best deck of the format, and this card is a potentially key new combo piece for them. It doesn't look like any of the ultras from the set are short printed or anything like that, thankfully, but with 133 cards in the set and only 15 cards per mini box, your chances of pulling the card that you want are actually pretty slim. Right now we're seeing this card at about $20 a piece, which I think is actually pretty reasonable as a potentially key card for a tier 1 strategy. I think as recently as yesterday or 2 days ago, people were only selling it for as low as $30 to $40, so it's good that the price has already cooled off since then. Now, because this card isn't necessarily short printed or anything like that, I would expect this card to continue to fall in price as the set is opened up more, maybe down to around the $10 to $15 range. However, because of its playability, it might stay steady at $20 for the next little while. In this set specifically, because there are so few other value cards in the set, I do think that Remus is going to retain a good chunk of its value, but a lot of it does depend on just how important this card is in the way that Dragon Link decks will now be built. If this card is kind of excluded or it's not as good as people thought, then yeah, maybe it's only worth $5 or so. If I were you guys, I would hold off for a week or two before buying Remus as well. I think it's very likely to dip down into the low teens around the $10 to $12 mark, especially with all of the product that's being torn open. So onto a couple of other cards that I've been keeping an eye on recently. Pot of Prosperity is a card that was down at the $80 mark, but has recently been trending upwards to the $100 price point that it's currently at. This card is an amazing card that improves consistency for a lot of different decks, especially those that don't need to burn through every single one of their extra deck monsters. However, I do think it's more of a personal preference thing. At the last LCS in the top cut, we saw it used in Zoodiac Eldritch, Shaddoll Invoked, Buster Blader, Tri-Brigade, but it wasn't used all of the time. It isn't a mandatory card, right? It's not like you're seeing it in every single Shaddoll Invoke deck, but it can be an amazing card in the right situation if used by a particular player. Anyways, it does seem a little bit odd that we're seeing Prosperity trending upwards in price, despite how I feel like it doesn't see as much play as cards like Lightning Storm or Triple Tactics Talent. However, what we do need to keep in mind is that in the 2021 Megatins, we now have confirmed that we're going to be getting reprints of sets like Ignition, Assault, and Rise of the Duelist, which means everyone is now expecting Lightning Storm, Talents, and Droplets to be reprinted, while Pot of Prosperity theoretically isn't going to be reprinted until the 2022 Megatins if the next batch of reprints follows the same pattern. This means it will be another year and a half before Pot of Prosperity gets reprinted, so a lot of people are jumping in and trying to pick up the card now. Pot of Prosperity is just one of those generic staple cards that is going to consistently get a lot of hype despite seeing fluctuating amounts of play. To be honest, I think it is going to stay up at the $100 mark for at least the next half a year to a year, maybe even continue to trend upwards to the $120 mark if it starts to see even more play than it already has. If you guys don't own this card already, I do think it's fine if you want to suck it up and just pay up in order to play with it, because you have that year and a half time frame to use the card before it does get reprinted, though obviously $100 is still a lot to be spending on a single card. The good thing is that this card isn't necessary to own, and regardless of what deck you're planning on using, your deck probably will still be able to function without running Pot of Prosperity. The next card I want to take a look at here is Cross Sheep. So I remember when this card first came out, it was right around when the Shaddoll structure deck came out as well. This card was hyped up and it was crazy. This was originally just a rare, but it was still like a $10 card before we eventually got a reprint in Battles of Legend Armageddon as an ultra rare that cooled it right off, and it was only $1 or so. I believe I actually mentioned it in a penny stock video back in September of last year when the ultra rare version was only $1. Now, Cross Sheep hasn't necessarily seen any more play recently, but it is trending up in price, with the ultras up at $4 each and the original rares at $3. Cross Sheep is best used with ritual or fusion based strategies, but the card isn't really played in Shaddoll or Invoke strategies right now. Those decks aren't extremely combo based where they can really take advantage of Cross Sheep. However, we do have a new archetype coming in Dawn of Majesty called the Magic Keys, which actually happen to be a cross between fusions and rituals, so maybe it's possible that Cross Sheep will be useful in there. So at first glance, this feels like a great card to pick up. It's generic, it has an amazing combo effect, and it's already starting to trend upwards in price with lots of room for potential to grow. However, I do want everyone to keep in mind that we are getting cards from Ignition Assault reprinted in the 2021 Megatins, and I feel like Cross Sheep would make a really interesting candidate to be reprinted as either a super rare or a secret rare in there. That being said, having the 2 holo printings would certainly limit just how high this card's price could go, and we would expect this ultra rare printing from Battles of Legend to fall when the Megatins come out and this card's reprint is confirmed. Of course, on the flip side of that, we could see this card left out of the Megatins, which would cause its price to shoot way up, so that's always a possibility. Overall though, although the card is still relatively cheap and may trend upwards over the next couple of months as we move closer to the release of Dawn of Majesty, I would avoid being too invested in this card with the possibility of that additional reprint coming up. Another card to keep an eye on is Wind the Wind Channeler, a wind monster out of Rise of the Duelist. This card lets you discard itself and another wind monster to search for any wind monster out of your deck that has 1500 or less defense points, but then you can only use wind monster effects for the rest of the turn. Now this is basically a generic wind monster searcher, and while normally I wouldn't be too excited about something that's wind based, keep in mind that we do have Synchro Storm coming out in just a couple of months. In there we're getting support for the Speedroid, Lyrilusk, and Fleur archetypes, all of which are wind based, and although we don't know exactly what's going to be good or meta relevant, this card just might be a useful tool in one of those strategies to improve consistency. As a result of this uncertainty, we're actually seeing this card climb up to the $9 mark, while it was down at $3 to $4 for most of its lifetime ever since its release in Rise of the Duelist. Although this card does have potential, we do need to keep in mind that this is another card that's due to be reprinted in the 2021 Megatins, and a reprint is almost certainly going to drag its price down. As an ultra rare from a fairly recent set, this card can be pretty easy to overlook, so be sure to set them aside out of your bulk when you're digging through binders or boxes. I think that this card is likely to fall in price back down to around the $5 mark, because I feel like locking you into only wind monster effects is a really big restriction that's going to prevent this card from seeing much meta relevant play, so I think that moving this card at anywhere from $8 to $10, if you can find a buyer, is a really solid move. Alright guys, the final card I want to take a look at here is the Chaos Creator. So this card is really good in theory. You summon it by banishing a light and dark monster from your graveyard, just like BLS, and if you summon it that way, you get to take 3 banished monsters, summon one of them, and then put the other 2 on the bottom of your deck. It's like a really free combo extender, and I feel like this card has always had a lot of potential. However, for whatever reason, this card is now up at $22 a piece, which is a lot considering that the card was down in the single digits for quite a while. Now, to be completely honest, I don't know why this card is shot up in price out of nowhere. I just saw it on the YGO Prices website and I thought it was a mistake or something like that. The only thing I can really think of is that it might be a Dragon Link extender. Maybe this card could be really situationally useful, but I haven't seen it used anywhere at all, or even really talked about actually. It just has the 1 printing from Toon Chaos, which is a set that we all know is, even now, ridiculously hard to find, so there's probably not a ton of copies of this card running around on the market, which could be a contributing factor, but isn't going to single-handedly make this card double in price overnight. If you guys do know why this card is so expensive right now, please do make sure you let me know in the comments below. Alright guys, that is it for today's Market Watch episode. So yeah, there's not a lot to say about Ghosts from the Past that hasn't been said already. We all kind of know that the set just isn't that great. However, I do still think there are some interesting opportunities for investment there. Make sure that you guys stick around next week for a video where I discuss cards that I think might be worth picking up and investing in, cards that are maybe flying under the radar right now, but definitely have some decent overall growth potential. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, make sure that you hit the thumbs up button for me and let me know. Also, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about Ghosts from the Past or the other cards that we talked about in today's Market Watch, or let me know about other cards that are trending on the market so that I can potentially cover them in a future episode as well. Also, if you haven't already, make sure that you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.